Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Sturzinger. I'm the Assistant Director here at Canisius University. I would like to welcome you all to our webinar, the Student Loan Debt Past Repayment and Forgiveness. Now, we have a lot of information we want to get to today, so we're going to jump right in. I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. We have Mercedes Reese and Kristen O'Connor, who both join us from the Neighborhood Legal Services EdCap program. Now, Kristen, I will turn the program over to you. We're so excited to have you. Thank you.
Sarah, I am just going to share my screen. Okay, so this is our guide to strategic student loan repayment. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Kristen O'Connor. I'm an attorney and student debt counselor at Neighborhood Legal Services. I'm joined by my colleague Mercedes Rees, who will be popping in to help me answer some of your questions. But for now, let's just get into it. So today we'll be going over our EdCap program, federal student loan cancellation, what happened with that, what's coming next, key dates to know for student loan repayment, 3 strategies for tackling student loan debt, the student loan repayment checklist, and then exploring forgiveness, cancellation, and discharge options. I can also share this PowerPoint because we have a bunch of resources listed. So you can click on the links that are most applicable to you and your circumstances. So I'm an attorney with the Education Debt Consumer Assistance Program. And I want to make it clear that this is just the program that funds us. This is how we do our community presentations and how we're able to provide student debt counseling. So to continue, like I said, we're funded by the Community Service Society. And so we're a statewide program. We're just a network of advocates and attorneys who are trying to help people figure out their student debt. There are no income restrictions. We can help anyone who has student loan debt. So if you have friends, neighbors, family, they need assistance, we're here to help. And some of the things that we can help with are determining your best loan repayment options, accessing loan forgiveness, cancellation, and discharge, applying for consolidation, deferment, and forbearances, resolving issues with loan servicers and lenders, getting out of default to prevent wage garnishments, Social Security offsets, and tax intercepts. And we can also help folks who are just starting out with going to school, they're getting these financial aid offers. We'll help them understand what those offers mean and try to make a plan to go to college with less student loan debt. So federal student loan cancellation, what's next? Most of us probably know that the Supreme Court struck down the Biden administration's plan to cancel up to $20,000 in student loan debt for eligible borrowers. Right now, the government is exploring cancellation under a different legislation, the Higher Education Act of 1965, but this will be more time consuming, and we're not sure what the outcome will be. This path forward does require a rulemaking process. So it's going to be lengthy, and we're not sure what to expect and when we can expect any sort of relief. But there are a number of other student loan programs that are unaffected. And so we can still take advantage of programs like income-driven repayment forgiveness, public service loan forgiveness, total and permanent disability discharge, borrower defense to repayment, and fresh start for folks who have loans in default. But before we get into that, what dates do you need to know? So in August, the new income-driven repayment plan was made available. This payment plan is called SAVE. It will be replacing the REPAY income-driven repayment plan, and I'll talk a little bit more in depth about that. In September, interest began accruing on federal loans. So if you log into your student aid account, you'll see that those interest rates are back up to what they were prior to COVID. They were set at 0.0 for most of us for quite a long time. And then in October, our first loan payments will be due. This will be a different due date for everybody. Some servicers still haven't released these due dates to borrowers, but for some folks, if you log into your student aid account or your servicer website, you will be able to see that date of your first payment. On December 31st of this year, the income-driven repayment account adjustment ends. This is basically a program where the Department of Education is trying to give as much payment history to borrowers as possible, kind of righting some of their wrongs from the past. And it'll specifically be beneficial to folks who have been paying for a really long time. But this is also where consolidation might be beneficial to you. So I'll talk about that a little bit more later as well. And then sometime in 2024, we're going to get the results of this account adjustment. So you're going to learn how much qualifying payment history you have towards either public service loan forgiveness or income-driven repayment forgiveness. So you know how much longer you have to pay on these loans. And then in late 2024, probably around August or September, Fresh Start for defaulted borrowers will end. This was a COVID program that allows people who had their federal loans in default to contact their debt collector and get out of default in a very streamlined way, almost as simply as that, just by asking to get out of default. But I'll talk more about that later as well. There is a 12-month on-ramp program for repayment. So what this means is that interest began accruing September 1st. Payment will resume sometime in October. So from that first payment due until September 30th of 2024, if you miss a payment, you make a late payment, you only make partial payment, this will not be reported to credit agencies. Your loans won't go into default. You won't take a hit on your credit score. It's kind of just a soft launch of getting back into repayment for folks who, we're not used to it. We haven't had to do it for a long time. But the downside to this is that if you miss payments during these months, you won't receive payment credit towards public service loan forgiveness or income-driven repayment forgiveness. So it's something to consider looking at your finances, what makes the most sense for you. But overall, there are 3 basic strategies for tackling student loan debt. The first one, which is kind of what we all wish to do, I think, is pay your debt in full as quickly as possible. But that, of course, is really difficult. This strategy is really only suitable for borrowers who have a low loan balance and a relatively high income compared to that balance. You have the option of making lump sum payments or paying more than your minimum amount each month, regardless of your payment plan. Most of us, however, that's not feasible. So we will pay the minimum required and pursue forgiveness if eligible. So if you have a high balance, a high loan balance, and then low to moderate income, this is probably your best strategy. You'll make the minimum required payment until you become eligible for forgiveness. And then it's important to note that making extra payments or paying more than the minimum required is not advisable, because if you reach forgiveness, there's really no benefit to you. You're just kind of losing that money. And then some folks are they may never reach forgiveness. They may never pay off their debt, and that's okay. You can pay the minimum required until you pass away. This is typically for older borrowers who just cannot realistically repay their loans or reach that 10 to 20 year, 10 years for public service loan forgiveness or 20 to 25 years for income-driven repayment forgiveness. Federal student loans are dischargeable upon death. So when you die, your student loans are discharged. So if we break it down a little bit, what do we need to do to prepare for repayment? Here's our little overview. You have to update your contact information with federal student aid, identify your student loan servicer and review your online account information, make sure you're enrolled in the right repayment plan, know what your repayment amount will be and when it's due, be ready to make your monthly payments, and if things go wrong, escalate a complaint and contact us. We'll help you figure it out. So first thing, update your contact information with federal student aid. Anyone who has taken out federal loans, your information is in studentaid.gov. If you haven't logged in a while, you may have to reset your username or your password. If you don't remember any of your login information, you may have to verify your identity, which can take 7 to 10 business days. And once you log in, once you get access, you need to make sure that you update your email address to an email address you still have access to, and make sure that you have a phone number, again, that you have access to. You'll need to input that information, and then there's a 2-step verification method for every time you log in. It will send a code to either your email or your phone number, and you have to put in that code. This is really important because a lot of folks are used to getting notifications in the mail, and Student Aid is really sending out a lot of important information just to your inbox. So it's really important that this is updated. The next thing, once you're in your Student Aid account, is you want to scroll down a little bit, look at your dashboard, and it will tell you who your loan servicer is. About 40% of student loan borrowers have had a servicer change since 2020. So if your loans were with Navient and they were federal loans, they were moved over to Aidvantage. If they're still with Navient, you have FFELP loans or private loans. Great Lakes loans were moved over to Nelnet. And then OSLA stopped servicing loans and transferred their accounts to Aidvantage. So you probably have a different servicer than you did pre-COVID. And then if you've ever submitted any documentation related to public service loan forgiveness, your loans will be with MOHELA. And if they're with a different servicer now and you submit a PSLF form, your loans will transfer to MOHELA. So once you figure this out, you want to make sure that you have an account with that servicer. Again, if they have your loans, you'll just need to enter your social security number and your date of birth, and you can make an account. If that's not working, that means they don't have your loans. And so if you need help troubleshooting, we're happy to help with that. So the next thing is make sure you're enrolled in the right repayment plan. If you were enrolled in a repayment plan prior to COVID, you are still probably enrolled in that plan. You should double check, again, in your student aid account. If you ever did a consolidation during COVID, you may have been, and I would say probably have been, unenrolled and put back into a standard repayment plan. So just double check. So what are the differences between these? An income-driven repayment plan and a traditional repayment plan. So an income-driven repayment plan, these were made to be more affordable payments based on your income. The great thing about them is that everyone who's enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan can reach loan forgiveness in 20 to 25 years if they're making payments. And you have to be enrolled in income-driven repayment plans in order to be eligible for forgiveness programs. Another benefit is that you can adjust your payment when your income changes. So if you have, if you end up losing your job, you can recertify that your income is now 0, and your payments can be adjusted accordingly. That also is kind of one of the cons, is that every single year you do have to verify your income. Although the federal student aid website is now more effectively connected to the IRS, and if you give permission, they will just source your income data from the IRS directly. So it's become a little bit easier. There's the potential for interest accumulation over extended repayment periods. But if you're in the new SAVE plan, that's not something to worry about, and I'll talk more about that later. And there could be a longer repayment period depending on your income and how much debt you have. But these plan, the names are Revised Pay As You Earn, which has now become SAVE. If you were enrolled in REPAY, you were automatically enrolled in SAVE. Pay As You Earn, income-based repayment, and then income contingent repayment. These are all just a little bit different. And income contingent repayment is really the best option, or the only option if you want to be in an income-driven repayment plan for Parent Plus loans. And then they're all just a little bit different. I'll explain more about what is most beneficial to you if you have certain types of loans. But for some folks, if they don't have a lot of student loan debt, traditional repayment plans may be the most effective option. You'll have more predictable payments, a shorter repayment period in some cases, which may mean you pay your loans off quicker. You don't have to certify your income because it's not based on your income, but you may also have higher monthly payments. There's limited flexibility in adjusting those payments. If something happens in your life where you are struggling to afford the payments, there's only a few things you can do. You can only go into a few forbearances, a few deferments. There's no forgiveness. You will pay off your loan, and these plans are standard, graduated, and extended. So the new income-driven repayment plan, it's called SAVE, which stands for Saving for a Valuable Education. Like I said, this is replacing REPAY, and they're rolling this plan out in parts. So as of this summer, they have changed a few things. So if you used to be in REPAY, they would determine your payment amount based on your discretionary income. And how they would formulate your discretionary income is that it would be your income minus 150% of the federal poverty level for your household size. And then they would take 10% of whatever that number was. Right now, they changed it to protect more of your income from repayment. So they raised that to 225% of the federal poverty line for your household size. And so then it's 10% of what that number is. So a lot of folks are going to see that their student loan repayment is lower than it maybe was before COVID, because you have more income that's protected. And with SAVE, if your payment doesn't cover the interest, the excess interest won't be added to your loan. So your loan balance won't keep just increasing every month if you have a low payment. If you're married and file your taxes separately, you can exclude your spouse's income. This is really important. If you are married and you file your taxes jointly, both incomes will be taken into account, and you may actually have a pretty high repayment. We always advise people who are in income-driven repayment plans to file their taxes married separately. But if you are concerned about that, talk to a tax advisor and see where you could save the most money, because there are tax benefits to filing jointly. Additional benefits will be implemented in July of 2024, which will further reduce payments for a lot of folks. The biggest change here will be that instead of it being just 10% of your discretionary income across the board, if you only have undergraduate loans, it will be 5% of your discretionary income. If you have only graduate loans, it'll be 10% of your discretionary income. And if you have a mix of both, it will be a weighted average of your principal loan balances. So that's exciting. There will be more to come. I do see we have some questions in the chat. and in the Q&A. So just to be clear, we will answer these at the end of the presentation. I'll make sure I cover all the questions you have. So how do you enroll in SAVE? If you were enrolled in REPAY, you were automatically transitioned into SAVE unless you consolidated during the payment pause. In that case, you will probably have to re-enroll. They seem to have put just a lot of borrowers into a standard plan after consolidating. But eligible borrowers can switch to the SAVE plan at any time through studentaid.gov. You will just have to certify your income based on your 2022 tax returns. And then an important note is that Parent Plus loans are not eligible for the SAVE plan. The only income-driven repayment plan that Parent Plus loan borrowers can access is the income contingent repayment plan. In order to access that plan, you will have to consolidate. If you're not seeing that option available to you, you're only seeing standard plans, that's because you didn't consolidate. And so if you have questions about consolidation, we can help with that. It's a very quick process. It takes about 10 minutes. So overall, which plan is best? Every situation is different. There are so many circumstances to consider, but generally, if you have direct federal loans, SAVE is probably your best option for an income-driven repayment plan. A traditional plan may be the best option if you can't afford an income-driven repayment plan. This sounds kind of weird, but again, this might be the case if you have a low debt to high income ratio. Your income-driven repayment plan may actually be more expensive than a standard plan, so you want to weigh your options. If you have a Parent Plus loan, income contingent repayment is the only income-driven repayment plan you can be in. And if you want to reach forgiveness for those Parent Plus loans, you have to be in this plan for public service loan forgiveness and income-driven repayment forgiveness. Again, you have to consolidate. Traditional plans may have lower monthly balances than income contingent repayment, but you don't have a 10-year forgiveness with public service loan forgiveness or 25-year forgiveness with income-driven repayment forgiveness. If you have non-direct loans, these are FFEL loans, Perkins loans, or HEAL loans, which have all been discontinued. They're all older loans. You may be able to consolidate those loans with your direct loans in order to be eligible for SAVE and to have other relief available to you. Otherwise, income-based repayment or traditional plans for FFEL, Perkins, and HEAL have their own standard repayment plans. Number 4, know your payment amount and its due date. Your servicer will send you an invoice with your monthly payment and exact due date at least 21 days before the first payment is due. You have the flexibility to change your repayment plan and adjust your monthly due date. So I don't know of anyone who has actually received their notice yet from a servicer, but it's important to know that if you see that your like maybe in your student aid account you see that your payment is due October 1st and you're like, oh man, I have my rent due that month, my car payment, or my rent due that day, my car payment is due that day, you can call your servicer and request a different due date. And if you're having trouble with that, again, we can help you resolve that issue. And you also are able to enroll in repayment plans over the phone. You'll need to know your adjusted gross income, your number of dependents, things like that, but it should be pretty easy. Just know that there are really long wait times right now to speak with a representative on the phone because everybody is getting ready for repayment next month. And then be ready to make your monthly payments. You can enroll in auto debit. If you were previously enrolled, you will have to re-enroll. Again, remember there's that on-ramp period if you can't make payments. And then There is always a forbearance or a deferment, but I wouldn't recommend that right now when there is this on-ramp period. There typically is a small interest rate reduction for each servicer if you do enroll in auto debit. If you're considering a forgiveness program, it won't really make much of a difference overall. And if you're kind of unsure about your financial situation, some folks aren't sure if they have private loans. You can get a free credit report every single week on annualcreditreport.com. This is just until the end of the year where you can run it weekly, but it does not impact your credit score. And then there have been so many changes in your servicer. The person you're speaking with probably doesn't know everything. Unfortunately, they do give out incorrect information. They are not always very helpful. So if that's the case, you should submit a complaint. You can do this with the Federal Student Aid Ombudsman, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and the Department of Financial Services. We can help you filing these complaints and with escalating these complaints so that you get a resolution. And just if something seems wrong to you, double check with us. We're happy to help you even with the tiny details. So exploring forgiveness, cancellation, and discharge options. Income-driven repayment forgiveness forgives your remaining loan balance after making payments under an income-driven repayment plan for between 20 to 25 years. There's no employment requirement. You just have to be enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan. What I mean by there not being an employment requirement is that if you are retired and you're only making $20,000 a year, your repayment would be $0 a month if you're in SAVE. And that counts as a qualifying payment towards income-driven repayment forgiveness. And the 20 to 25 years is based on what type of loans you have and what plan you're in. And then public service loan forgiveness forgives your remaining balance after 10 years if you work in a non-for-profit or a government job. You have to work for at least 30 hours a week. Doesn't have to be at just one position. If you work 15 hours at one job and 15 hours at another job, and they're both not-for-profits or government work, that counts. And then it's 10 years cumulative. It does not have to be consecutive. But you do have to have direct loans and be enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan. Borrower defense to repayment is a discharge option for borrowers who were kind of misled by their higher education institution. They were essentially defrauded. They thought that they were getting an education that they really weren't. Your school has engaged in misconduct and you took out federal loans to attend that school. These are typically for-profit colleges that we see. We used to see these commercials for them all the time, like Grand Canyon University, Corinthian colleges, schools like that. So you just have to file a borrower defense to repayment. And then total and permanent disability discharge is a discharge option for borrowers who are disabled. This is more broad than we might traditionally think of when we hear the word disabled. Here, disability means that you are prevented from working enough to support yourself because of a disability or a medical condition. This can be a mental health condition. This can be that you have really bad arthritis. Anything that could prevent you from having a job where you support yourself financially. They recently expanded this type of discharge so that you don't have to be receiving Social Security benefits to receive it. And you can have a doctor, which can be an MD, a DO, an NP, a PA, a licensed psychiatrist. A doctor just has to fill out an application or a statement, I should say, saying that you have this disability, you're unable to work because of it. And a lot of these programs like PSLF and IDRF are gonna see, you're gonna benefit through this IDR account adjustment. So the IDR account adjustment allows more borrowers to get qualifying payment credit towards these forgiveness programs. So the Department of Education is right now in the process of reviewing every student loan borrower's account. And they are going to give you payment credit for any period you spent in repayment, even if you were making late or partial payments. Any time spent in forbearance of 12 consecutive or 36 cumulative months, most deferments prior to 2013, and economic hardship deferments after 2013, any months prior to loan consolidation. So typically if you consolidated, that was like starting a new loan and your payment history would start at 0. If you ever consolidated, they're giving you payment credit from before that consolidation. And then credit will be awarded to you even if you were not making payments or you were not enrolled in an IDR plan. So if you've been enrolled in a standard plan for the past 10 years, you could still now be eligible for public service loan forgiveness or be making your way towards income-driven repayment forgiveness. Borrowers will not get credit for time and in-school deferments, the grace period after graduation, or time in default, except if they use Fresh Start to get out of default. They will get credit for the time in default during the COVID forbearance. And then for public service loan forgiveness, you must still meet the employment requirement. But again, there's no employment requirement for income-driven repayment forgiveness. So if you're interested in public service loan forgiveness, the first thing you have to do is make sure you have direct loans. If you don't have direct loans, consolidate by the end of the year. You have to file an employment certification form for every qualifying employer you've worked for since 2007. There's a PSLF help tool on studentaid.gov that makes it pretty simple. You just need your employer's federal tax identification number, their EIN, and then you enter your dates of employment, how many hours a week you worked, and then you can either print off the form, have it signed physically, or it can all be completed through DocuSign. Enroll in an income-driven repayment plan. Again, after the end of the year, when the account adjustment is completed, you will have to be enrolled in an IDR plan to continue accumulating qualifying payments. And then MOHELA, who is the servicer for all public service loan forgiveness loans, they have a payment tracker. Well, it will break down every single month and tell you if your payment is qualifying or not. So you can track your progress pretty easily that way. If you're pursuing income-driven repayment forgiveness, again, make sure you have direct loans, consolidate if you don't, enroll in an income-driven repayment plan. And we're hoping that when the Department of Ed releases the account adjustment results, that we will have a better way to track our progress towards IDRF in student aid. Our other forgiveness, cancellation and discharge programs. One of them is New York State Get On Your Feet. This is for folks who went to a college or university in New York for an undergraduate degree. They graduated, they're working and making under $50,000 a year, and it provides up to 24 months of loan payments. This is a really great program. I did this before I went to law school. It was a pretty easy program to get enrolled in. I really recommend it. Teacher loan forgiveness forgives up to $17,500 in federal loans for teachers who meet the criteria. There's also a school closure discharge for folks who were enrolled in a school that either closed or they withdrew shortly around the time that it closed. Bankruptcy should be a last resort because it is really difficult to discharge your loans through bankruptcy. You have to meet an undue hardship test. We don't practice bankruptcy at Neighborhood Legal Services, but we could connect you with an attorney who does. And then discharge upon death. If you have student loans at the time you pass away, your loans are discharged. They do not pass on to anybody else. And then Fresh Start Initiative is a new program for folks who have been in default. And the first thing you have to do is contact your debt collector. You log into your student aid account, it will say which debt collector your student debt is with. You call your debt collector, you say, I want to enroll in Fresh Start. You have to answer some questions about, in order to get enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan. They will then transfer your loans to a non-default servicer, and they'll be brought back in good standing. The default history will be removed from your credit report, and it's kind of like it never happened. If you want to continue with your education, you can now take out additional federal loans. And of course, if you use this program, you will get payment credit for the time that you were in default during the COVID forbearance. This process is quite slow, but it is a really great program, and it again will be available until probably August or September of 2024. So that is the gist of it. If you want to work with us, our helpline is 716-847-0650, extension 445. My email is attached, koconnor@nls.org. Or we also have drop-in hours from 12 to 4 p.m. on Thursdays at our Main Street office in Buffalo. So we're happy to help you with anything related to loan repayment, forgiveness, discharge, any question, we're happy to answer. But that concludes the presentation. So now I think we're going to answer some pre-submitted questions. Let me stop sharing my screen. Okay.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Mercedes Reese. I'm a Canisius graduate of 2019. I'm just helping Kristen out with the back end of this with the questions that you've submitted us. And as she has indicated, yeah, we are going to start with questions that were submitted prior to the webinar. A lot of these we've probably touched on in different ways throughout this presentation, but it is a good way just for us to reiterate for you what exactly the implications of the information we presented to you means. So with that, our first question, Kristen, is to qualify for loan forgiveness due to working for a nonprofit. Once you've been, oh, there goes my computer. I'm so sorry about that. Okay, so to qualify for loan forgiveness due to working for a nonprofit, how often do you need to recertify your income-based plan?
So once you enroll in a plan, in an income-driven repayment plan, you have to recertify your income every year. Right now, if you're enrolling in a plan, they're giving some dates that are a little bit more than a year, but it's generally about a year. And then we recommend verifying your employment again about every year just to keep it on track. If you're planning to leave an employer, I typically recommend that folks do that PSLF form on their very last day, get it into HR just so you have it on record.
Right, so then in the topic of forgiveness, how does a person request forgiveness if they've been identified as unqualified, even if they've only worked in nonprofits? And if you'd like, I could jump on this one. I have a little bit of an extended response here, mainly because this is like an interesting question. Would love to talk about this specific issue with the person who did submit this, just because we can't tell why you were denied based on your question submission here. But we did go through public service loan forgiveness eligibility, and just, for the sake of that, we'll reiterify that. It's qualifying employer, full-time employment on direct loan repayments, repayment under an income-driven repayment plan, or a 10-year standard repayment plan. And, those payments have to total 120 by the end. If you've been denied or listed as unqualified, based on your employer, you can submit reconsideration to your servicer or to the Department of Ed directly. That's something that we'd be more than willing to help you with. If you're a little confused as to whether your employer currently does qualify as a qualifying employer, you can look that up in the Federal Student Aid's employer search, and I'm going to drop that in the chat presently so you can search your own employers there. If you don't see your employer there, don't fret. You are able to submit requests to have your employer analyzed for qualifying employer status. That may be the case here. Again, we don't really know based on just the question, but please reach out to us. We'd love to assist you with this. Kristen, is there anything I missed on that one?
Yeah, I'll just add that a lot of folks don't realize that when you submit an employment verification, it is only up until that date that you submit it. You have to keep recertifying until you reach those 120 payments. And so if you only submitted one form like 2 years ago, they haven't kept track that you're still with that employer. You have to keep recertifying, which is kind of a hassle, but unfortunately just the way that it's set up.
Great. So the next question is more just asking for repayment plans for parents with federally subsidized loans.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that these are Parent Plus loans you're referring to. It's kind of hard to balance. Income contingent repayment is the only income-driven repayment option, and it is the most expensive option. So you can either be in a standard repayment plan and pay it off in full, or be in the ICR plan, which may actually be a little bit more expensive and pay it off in 10 years if you're in public service, or the 25 years for income-driven repayment forgiveness. If you need help kind of balancing what is the most cost-effective in the short term and also in the long run, we can help you with that. It's very specific to your financial information and then how much debt you have.
All right, so this next one is asking just for an explanation of details surrounding forgiveness for federal loans after 15 and 20 years of payment. We have talked a little bit about this, but probably best to reiterate what we've got going on here. Kristen spoke about public service loan forgiveness. That's the 120 qualifying payments, that's 10 years. And then Kristen also mentioned the income-driven repayment forgiveness, the 20 to 25 years, depending on your plan. Kristen, do you have anything to add there?
No, just that if you do have Parent Plus loans, it will always be 25 years because of the ICR plan. But traditionally, if you only have undergraduate loans, it will be 20 years, typically.
Okay. Now, how does a diagnosed mental disability impact the repayment of student loans?
Yeah, so if you have a diagnosis of any sort of medical condition that prevents you from working enough to support yourself, you can submit a total and permanent disability discharge. You can do this on your own, or you can have a representative do the form for you, which could be myself or Mercedes. It's a pretty easy application. You just need to have either an MD, a DO, an NP, a PA, or a licensed psychiatrist sign off and say that you have this disability and it prevents you from engaging in substantial gainful employment. And those discharges are happening pretty quickly, we're seeing. But in the meantime, if you alert your servicer, or specifically Nelnet, who handles all of these applications, that you're going to be applying, they will put you in a 120-day forbearance to allow you time to complete the application and get it processed.
So we've got a couple here that are just asking, the best path forward for someone with getting their student loans forgiven, and additionally just how to apply for loan forgiveness broadly. We appreciate you submitting those, but as we've mentioned a couple of times, it's kind of hard to really advise someone without knowing the full context of their situation. So if you're looking for, specific individual advice, please reach out to us at that number in the chat. Again, we'd love to help you. Moving forward, then, we do have a question regarding the new payment plan. This person is wondering if that, because if it's related to your income, how does this affect long-term affordability? And more specifically, this person is asking whether they will pay more in interest overall.
So the great thing about the SAVE plan is that if your monthly payment does not cover the interest, that interest will not be added to your balance. It just kind of goes away. So you won't be seeing like that increase in interest that we are historically used to, which is really great. And SAVE plan is, I think it's safe to say, by and far going to be the most affordable income-driven repayment plan in the short term as well as the long term. So yeah, I'm a proponent of the SAVE plan. And you really don't have to worry about interest the way that you used to.
So we do have a question here that's asking for specific programs for graduates of healthcare programs. And obviously we've talked about public service loan forgiveness, but there are additional programs that healthcare workers could qualify for. Again, these are usually context specific, but there's a couple, depending on what sort of healthcare worker you are. There's the Nurse Corps Loan Repayment Program, National Health Service Corps Loan Repayment Program, National Institute of Health has a loan repayment program. Depending on who you're working for, the Indian Health Services has a loan repayment program. And we'd be happy to steer you to all of those if you'd like to reach out to us. I'm not sure. I'm sure there are more that I haven't mentioned, but again, it's pretty context specific. So let's see. We are looking at the next question. We have a person who is a little just worried. They've been repaying on their loans from 2001. So what would you say to that person, Kristen?
I would say that you may have seen in the news that there have been a lot of loans forgiven recently, and that's through the IDR account adjustment. It seems that they're just kind of continuing to send out these notices of people who are having their loans forgiven through income-driven repayment forgiveness. They're seeing that these people have been paying on their loans for a really long time. If you haven't received that notice, that doesn't mean that you won't receive it soon. And I'll say that if you do have 20 years of payment history and you only have undergraduate loans, one of the things you may need to do is consolidate to get the maximum amount of payment history. And also, if you actually have already reached IDRF, you've reached the amount of qualifying payments and they're just behind, and you make any payments moving forward, they will have to refund you those payments. We can look at your repayment history and see kind of where you are and how soon you can expect to reach forgiveness. So we're happy to do that for you. But it depends on what types of loans you have, because you, again, might need to consolidate to get the benefit of the account adjustment and of income-driven repayment forgiveness.
Yeah, and just anecdotally, I recently had a client come to us. He had over $100,000 of student loan debt. I spoke to him on a Friday. That Monday, he had his loans discharged through this recount. He now currently has about 29,000, and that's 29,000 that, had we been contacted sooner, we could have consolidated and had his entire balance wiped. So there are some real world and some pretty extenuating implications here if you maybe don't know exactly how to navigate the system, that we are happy to help you benefit from. Now, looking at this last pre-submitted question, Kristen, is it too late to get forgiveness?
Well, that's a pretty broad question. I'm not sure if you're talking about the Biden program. That program obviously was struck down, as I mentioned, but it's not too late to get forgiveness. And in fact, the situation that Mercedes was talking about, when you get that notice that you have reached forgiveness through the account adjustment, you actually have the option to opt out, which some borrowers may want to do if they want to consolidate to then have their entire balance forgiven and not just a portion of it. But I think that forgiveness is going to be so much more accessible for so many more people moving forward. And so I don't know your exact circumstances, but I think that it will be an option for you in the future, if not very soon.
All right, so we're going to switch over to questions that were asked during this live session. Starting out, we have a person who started a doctorate program this semester who is currently working towards public service loan forgiveness. If this person makes payments while in school, will these count as payments? And would this person be better off not making payments at all?
If you're making payments, they will count as payments. And so that's, you're more than like, you can do that if you would like to. We don't really, I mean, it's really up to your like financial situation if you're able to do that. So yeah, if you're able to and want to, then they will count as payments in the long run.
All right. And actually, I've been informed that these responses have I've been typing responses in the chat, or rather, I've been typing responses that have been added to the chat to some of these questions. However, we do have 3 that weren't answered at all. So let's hit those and then we have time to circle back. We'll look at some of those other questions. But can you combine Sallie Mae loans with federal loans?
Sallie Mae loans are private loans, and you could technically refinance and make all of your federal loans private loans, but we do not recommend doing that. Keep your private, because that's the only way they can stay, and keep your federal loans federal, because there will always be relief options, forgiveness options with your federal loans that private loans just don't offer. So I recommend keeping them as is. If you're struggling with your private loan, we can help you try to figure out a different loan where you could refinance and maybe get a better interest rate, something that's more accessible for you.
All right, and this next one is asking whether the SAVE plan has differences between undergraduate and graduate professional schools.
Yes, so right now it doesn't, but come July 2024, if you have undergraduate loans, your repayment will be 5% of your discretionary income. If you have graduate loans, those loans will be 10% of your discretionary income. And so if you have both, it'll be proportional to those balances. So maybe around like 7.5% of your discretionary income for repayment, but that's not until July 2024.
All right, and what if you don't hear back about your income-driven repayment rate or amount before repayment begins?
Yeah, so we're seeing this a lot. The servicers are just
Inundated,
overwhelmed. Yeah. And so you do have to receive that notice from them that, hey, this is your amount due and your due date. So whatever they send to you, that's what they have to stick to. And if they haven't processed your IDR application, you can call them and make sure that everything is set, because again, you can enroll just over the phone in an IDR plan. You can make sure that they have your paperwork. And if you're having a hard time with that, we can also help you with that as a third party.
Yeah, no, we're happy to sit on the phone and speak to servicers for you. We understand that that's not fun, but we get paid to do it, so we might as well do it for you too.
Yeah.
So Lauren is asking, I applied for SAVE and it said I will pay about $11,000 over 20 years and $51,000 will be forgiven. What does this mean?
So this is when they make these loan simulators, they assume that you tell them what your income is now, and they assume that your income will gradually increase over the next like 10 years, 20 years. So this is what they're estimating that you will pay back towards your student loans. And at that time, if you pay $11,000, you'll have $51,000 remaining, and all of that will be forgiven. So if you were in a standard plan and you would pay the whole balance, in this situation, you would only pay $11,000 in total over these 20 years.
Great. And then we've got one from Michael here who is asking how we hold federal services like AidVantage accountable for payments made to ensure that we're on track to make that 20 or 25-year forgiveness. And he's noting that it seems like there's not a centralized place to see this.
Yeah, so AidVantage is kind of one of the servicers we're having some difficulty with. And essentially, your entire payment history should be transferred to AidVantage. What's in your student aid account should be in your AidVantage account. Thankfully, the Department of Ed and the federal student aid account has all of that data. So if we need to, work with AidVantage and be like, hey, this is all right here, update your information, we can do that. It will hopefully be easier and more your information will be more complete after the IDR account adjustment results come out in hopefully early 2024, because we have heard that some servicers are kind of having technical errors in their system because of the IDR account adjustment rules not matching the traditional repayment rules. And so it's just not automatically updating to what the IDR account adjustment rules are. But once the Department of Ed notifies them that this is actually your payment count, it should be updated in your account. So just, make sure you have your records clear and up to date so that if you do have to challenge something with AidVantage, you have that information and we can help you with that.
I think we're about out of time here. We've till 1:30.
We have till 1:30, but if
Okay.
we have any final questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. Otherwise, we can wrap.
Yeah, I mean, in the meantime, we can, if people want to think for a hot minute, we can go through some of the responses that they may not be able to read here. We had a question asking whether a person should change their income-based repayment plan to save, and if that will affect their ability to qualify for PSLF. Again, we're not able to obviously advise based on, limited context here. But as we've said, SAVE is kind of our main plan right now, just in the way that it's helping people access financial wellness. And that will not affect your ability to qualify for PSLF. And in fact, most people who are seeking PSLF do enroll in income-driven repayment, because just strategically, it makes more sense. If you're enrolled in your 10-year repayment plan, public service loan forgiveness is also 10 years. You're paying it all anyway. Let's see. There's a couple more here. All right, Kristen, if a borrower is in a forgiveness program or an income-driven repayment plan, is interest always accruing?
Traditionally, yes. With the SAVE plan, it no longer will be if you're enrolled in that plan. If you're in a different plan, interest will still be accruing. But then if you have forgiveness, so much of that will be forgiven that it doesn't really make that much of a difference over time. So you may end up paying a little bit more again over time, but it's really with that whole balance forgiven at the end, it's really not that impactful.
And then we have a question about a $0 payment here. So if your minimum payment is $0 a month, do those payments count as payments toward forgiveness?
Yes, they do.
Let's see. I think we're just about done with even the ones that we answered here. Hi, Sarah.
Hi,
how are you?
hello, welcome back. So thank you guys so very much for answering all your questions. If any of you watching do have any follow-up questions after what was presented, feel free to email us. We'll get them over to Kristen and Mercedes and get those answered for you. We're also going to share their contact information. So if you do want to set up a one-on-one, you'll be able to reach them. Thank you so much, Kristen and Mercedes. This was so informative. I have a lot to look at after this meeting. So that was a very informative presentation. You both did a great job. I want to thank you all at home for watching. We'll be sending out the recording the next few days. So keep an eye on your email for that. We will also be sending out a link to our new LinkedIn group. If you are on LinkedIn, please join us. We'll be sharing more information about upcoming events and more webinars like this one. You can connect with us there. So thank you so much. And I hope you'll have a great rest of your afternoon. Take care.
Thank you.